Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Sage and Mickayla, two homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads. We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sage from Terra Nova Acres.
And I'm Mickayla from Calico Cow Acres, and we both have homesteads in Western North Carolina.
Today's episode was not exactly planned, but for the last couple weeks we have been living through all of the after effects of Hurricane Helene, and it impacted our posting schedule, and we thought that we should sit down and talk about it, so that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's going to push all of our other episodes back, but we figured this one was kind of more important to get out to you guys in a more timely manner, so it's moving to the top of the list.
Alright, I feel like we should just start with what the heck happened. So, Hurricane Helene came through Florida, then Georgia, I think, then South Carolina, and then North Carolina. By the time that it reached us and went through Western North Carolina, it was technically a tropical storm, but it started as a hurricane at landfall. So, it wasn't just a lot of wind, and it wasn't just a lot of rain, which is what we all thought it would be, and were warned that it would be. We thought that it was, going to be a storm, but nothing crazy.
That's usually what we get, at least here, a little bit east of you, that whenever we have hurricanes, we usually get quite a bit of wind, but it's not anything crazy, and a lot of rain. We just get, the remnants, but it was so much more than that.
Right. It was not what we were anticipating. And in some areas, not all areas, but in some areas, they got over a foot of rain, and they had winds close to or over 100 miles an hour. And the coast might get that kind of storm, but we don't really. We have trees here, we have infrastructure here that's not used to withstanding that kind of damage. And so because it was so much more significant than what we normally get, especially the trees came down everywhere, took out power lines, the amount of rain that fell all over the entire watershed all at once is, everything drains to the creeks, everything drains to the rivers, and they were already full from a little bit of rain that we had a couple days before. We're already kind of at flood conditions at the beginning of, and then we just got so much more. And so flooding, the trees, and of course that amount of rain also caused mudslides.
Yeah. So usually when you think about hurricanes, you think of the storm surge coming in and then it kind of just goes back out into the ocean. But the reason it's affecting where we are so badly is because of the geography of where we live. And so like you said, mudslides and just the flooding in the creeks and whatnot. But if anybody's listening and they're not familiar with our area, pretty much every town in the mountains is built at the base of a valley, a lot of them near creeks and rivers and whatnot, because that's the only flat place to build. And so the elevation of the mountains makes everything worse because there's not anywhere for the water to go. It piles on and then it hits structures, and those structures add to the velocity of the water. And so I was looking into this a little bit, and at Mount Mitchell, where the reservoirs for Asheville, the water reservoirs are, and the dams, that's about 5,500 feet elevation above Lake Lure. And that's where all the water, that's the path that water took. So Highway 9 and down through Asheville, those are the two main routes. The most rainfall that was tracked was 29.7 inches or something. And that was up there.
That's crazy.
And think about that traveling through the mountains, 5,500 feet in elevation, and all of that, all of the velocity and debris and everything it picked up along the way. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. I keep seeing the word catastrophic, and that's the only word to describe it. And I feel like that's still not enough.
So the combination of it taking all of us by surprise, the magnitude of that storm, and then all of that water that you talked about, obviously taking houses with it, taking roads out, taking, unfortunately, people with it too. When you combine all of that, you know, it shuts down not just Asheville. This did not just hit Asheville. We keep saying Asheville because pretty much everybody knows where that is. We say Batcave.
Yeah.
You guys don't know where that is, right? But yes, it affected the city of Asheville, but it also impacted more communities around it than I can count. You know, I don't live in Asheville. You don't live in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
And we both felt effects from it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to put it in perspective, I am probably where we're located. Our homestead is the outer, like the outskirts of the worst parts of the storm. So our town got hit really bad with the trees down, but we're not in the mountains. We're in the foothills. So we didn't get the flooding wasn't as much of a disaster here, but we are an hour outside of Asheville. Like we're an hour east of Asheville and you're north of Asheville. So it's a really big span. Like even Charlotte was having flooding and that's a little bit more than an hour. That's 2 hours, I think. Have you looked at, or do you know what they recorded for that 3-day interval of rainfall for your area specifically?
I have a rain gauge, so I know how much I got. Before it was the hurricane, it was probably related to the hurricane, but it wasn't technically part of the hurricane. There was a band of rain that came through. We got 4 inches of rain in half a day, so it was that afternoon. The next day, it was drizzly, but it wasn't strong, and that was a half inch. Day 2.
Okay.
Day 3, when it was the storm was hitting, the hurricane was hitting, it was another 4 inches almost exactly in that morning. So technically, that's a 48-hour time span, right? Mm-hmm. But it's because day and night, whatever. There were 2 significant rainfall events of 4 inches that kind of bookended that. And the first one is what, you know, drove the rivers in the area kind of to capacity already, and then the second rainfall event pushed it over the edge.
Like 9-ish, 10?
8.5. Yeah.
Okay. So I looked for our county on Friday, like what we had gotten from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Mm-hmm. Because we were getting storms Tuesday. That's what took my internet out on Tuesday night. And ours was the county-wide average, I think, was 23 inches. Almost 23 inches. It was like 22.5, 22.7. Our property, what I kind of guesstimated, was about 13 to 14 over that 3 to 4 day span. That's a lot of water. Like, even though we're not in the mountains, it's so much water. I was just curious if you knew, like, more specifically for your area what that was. Because I know it was more higher in, like, north of you. That's where they got, like, the 30 inches.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I know my area, and then I know Asheville, which Asheville, on the first day when we got 4 inches, they got almost a foot. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they got when the storm really hit. I wasn't able to look it up.
I think Wednesday night or Thursday night, Biltmore Village was already flooded. Yeah. It was already like 3 feet underwater.
Yeah.
And that was 2 days before the storm actually hit. A day or 2. That's insane.
Yeah. Biltmore Village is prone to flooding. That's something they deal with a lot. So again, like, yes, it's not great, but that still didn't make us think, like, oh, this might be.
Those were just thunderstorms.
Right.
Like, it was just rain. And that was before the hurricane hit.
And then once the storm actually did hit, and one of the main things for most of us, it was more substantial damage for some people in particular areas, but for most of us, the general experience, first thing was that we lost power, right? Because there were thousands of trees down, like the whole grid around here. It's just toast. And so when there's no power, you can't fuel up at gas stations. When there's no power, the stores, if they stay open, they don't take credit cards. Anywhere's only taking cash because they can't process your credit card if they don't have power. Mm-hmm. And so that immediately limits food, that immediately limits water, that immediately limits your ability to travel anywhere. And that is fully something that I was not prepared for.
The lack of power also limits your ability to get cash.
Right. Yes. That's an important part of that.
So the reason that there were so many trees that came down too, at least here, it was every other tree. Literally like 2-foot diameter. Every other tree was down, and they were all tangled up in the power lines. Talking about the water that we were getting and the storm surge, and another thing that's different here than it looks like in Florida or on the coast is we don't have the palm trees here that bend and will like take the wind. We have real big pine trees, and they are in a lot of the time shallow soil because they're on the sides of hills and mountains, and it's clay, and it's also really, really wet. And so they're not being like the moisture in the dirt. They're like falling over a lot more easily because it's just soggy.
Yeah, it's not holding it in there the way it normally would. Yeah, that was absolutely another aspect of it. Having both that water that makes the soil so soggy and then the wind factor too. Those at once. We're not made for it. We're really not to that magnitude at least.
And so, yeah, they're having to rebuild a lot of the power situation. Instead of just like fixing it, they're like installing new like electrical poles and new wires because the trees are so tangled in them. Like on our road, right down the road from us, 10 seconds away, it's just a whole row of fully grown, very massive pine trees. And when I say every other tree was down in it, I'm not exaggerating. And they're just like tangled in them. So they just gave up. They were like, nope, we're going to put new ones up.
Right. Normally when they fix a power line, they'll take out the affected section and they'll splice it in. But if it's the entire length of the line, you can't really do that. You kind of have to replace it.
Yeah, and we have poles snapped in half, and they had to replace everything pretty much. And I know in the more flooded areas too, that's been like a major thing, is they're having to replace the whole substations and whatnot, not just the poles and the wires. So
it's a lot. It's a lot of damage. And when we talk about the flooding aspect, I don't know about around here, but where I am, there's the flood that happened in 1916 that everyone references. I forget if it's 1916 or 1917. It's one of those years. That everyone references as like the big deal, the big flood. This topped it. There was a river gauge somewhere along the French Broad. And in 1916, which was the previous record, it was about 23, 24 feet. It was 27 feet, give or take a little bit, this time around. So to break the record by multiple feet is a lot. It obviously went over roads. The River Arts District in Asheville, which, as the name would suggest, is next to the river, was underwater when I was driving around on the second day, which we'll get to that a little bit more later. But it was almost up to the highway, and the highway's on a bridge. The highway's not close to the river. And it wasn't just the height, it's also how far it spreads when it does that. The river, the flowing part of the river, was through buildings as I was watching it the day after the storm.
Seeing the flowing part is what really got me. Like, until I started seeing videos of like the rushing, I was like, wow, I can't even. I haven't been there because I've not wanted to like be in the way of anybody. But I can't even fathom it still. Like, even seeing the pictures, I'm like, I know this place well. I know the River Arts District well. I've done projects there for like school and stuff. My capstone project was there, my thesis. And I know how high that bridge is. I know how high New Belgium is above the water across the river. And that was underwater like multiple feet.
Right. For it to go to the roof or past the roof of big buildings. Warehouses. It's hard, even though I saw it, it's hard to fathom, right? Sitting here on this couch, being cozy right now. It feels like it didn't happen in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. I know, that's why we're trying to record this now, so that we don't forget, so we can still, like, remember things vividly, because I've got power back now, and I'm, like, trying to get my life back together and, like, get back on track, and I'm like, okay, but I also don't want to forget about everything that's happening.
And something that we should acknowledge before we really talk about anything else is this was a genuine tragedy. Hundreds of people went missing. Hundreds of people still haven't been found. so many people lost their lives. And we are sitting here again, comfortable on this couch, incredibly fortunate to have come out of this as unscathed as we have. And so I don't want this to come across as us trying to capitalize on this experience. I want to share this experience so that everyone can understand, here is what happened.
I mean, because we did experience it, and like we experienced it in different ways because we weren't in the same location. And I think even people who are like 100 feet down the road from each other experienced it differently.
This discussion is meant to be respectful, but also acknowledge what happened here.
Hopefully we can make it through this without crying, because I already had a really hard time doing that with my YouTube video recapping this. So
I cried on the way here thinking about recording this. So yeah. What was your initial reaction when you were experiencing the storm coming through? Like when it was raining, when you were hearing the wind, when you were hearing the trees fall, what was going through your head?
So this is the part where I'm saying I might laugh a little, because I actually didn't think it was very bad. I didn't realize how bad it was until it was done. And we walked up to the road and saw a tree down. And then we met some neighbors and realized that all of the trees are down and all of the power's out and it might be a while. And at that point, we really didn't have access to the outside world because we technically had service. I'm doing air quotes if you're listening. But it wasn't really working at that point. Like, it still said I had service, but it was taking 20 minutes to send a text message. I couldn't open anything. I don't think that I realized the extent of it for at least a few days. But sitting here, I was literally sitting right here on the couch. Taylor was trying to sleep in our bedroom. The whole time I was sitting here, I was like, okay, this wind is pretty windy. It's some wind. It's not anything small. Like, it's definitely a storm. I was surprised there wasn't lightning and it was just rain, but the trees were bending back and forth. But it didn't feel like anything I hadn't seen here before, because we do get a lot of wind through here. And there were a couple times where I was like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous that Taylor's laying in our bedroom, like that tree might fall on our house. But we didn't hear any trees falling. There was a little bit of leaf debris, like chunks of leaves in our yard and stuff. But other than that, like, and the flooding down in the orchard, which I'm used to, it's more than I've ever seen. But I wasn't concerned because it wasn't anywhere near our house. It's still 20 plus feet below our house. And it's flowing out into the woods. During the experience, I was like, okay, the power went out. The power goes on all the time. It'll probably be back on in a few hours. Joke's on me. It was not. I was not thinking it was anything more than what I've experienced here before. How about you?
I had a similar experience. I mean, I woke up at 5:30 because I heard the wind and I was like, all right, I'm not going back to sleep now. Because immediately, I think about that and I think about the animals and I can't see them from my house. So just my anxiety and my concern for them won't let me sleep. So I was like, all right, I'm up. I'll get up. I still had power at that point when I woke up.
Was that when the storm hit you? Was like 5:30?
Like, maybe it hit a little bit before. That's just when I woke up. I don't know for sure when it started, but 5:30
it didn't get bad here until like 7.
Okay. I woke up at 5:30 and I was like, all right, it's pretty substantial wind. It's a little concerning. And I went out on my front porch because I was a little concerned about a tree hitting my house. I live around a lot of trees. That's very possible. And not that me standing on my porch does anything about that, right? But what else was I going to do? And then it would come through in bursts where I could tell it was ramping up. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I was hearing trees cracking on my neighbor's property, which is, I don't know the cardinal direction. It was to the right of me when I was standing on my porch. And I was like, wow, okay. That's new for me. I've never heard that. Like, I've heard a tree fall here and there, but not falling, cracking in half. Cracking in half because the wind is so strong. And I think the only reason they didn't fall over is because specifically where I am, we didn't get more rain. I had stayed out there until it passed, and when it passed, I said, okay, yeah, that was crazy. But again, I didn't think it was that much more significant than what I had witnessed there before. And it wasn't until my neighbors came over and said, hey, I hope you're not trying to go anywhere today. There's trees down all over the road. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe the power will be out for a day. Crazy. Whoa. Very wrong. And when I drove down my road and saw, I don't know how many trees it was anymore. It was at least 6, 7 trees that were fully down on the road. But then were also trees that were still on the ground but leaning over the road so that it like brushed the top of your car when you drove under them. And you drive under them like, please don't give way right now. That would suck. That was crazy. The power lines actually being down and laying across the road and having to drive over them. Never experienced that before. But even then, I couldn't go very far because the other roads were blocked off. So it took me a while to be able to get out and see, like, oh my god, this is substantial damage.
I also was out in the carport, and I feel the same way about the burst. I was like, okay, it's calming down, maybe it's leaving, and then I was like, a few minutes later, it's like, oh, it's ramping up again, and it would get really crazy. That was a little nerve-wracking. But yeah, I think we had a similar experience, though, because I didn't hear trees cracking from standing outside or in the house, but it ended here around like 11:30. The rain finally died down. It was still a little windy. And we went up because we had been seeing people turn around at the end of our driveway, like just past our driveway, and couldn't see why, but we assumed it was a tree. So at like 11, we walked up there and saw the tree down, and it's not anything crazy. It's probably like a 30-foot tall tree. Nothing insane. It's just a pine tree, cedar, which most of the trees that fell were. Interesting note. And we were up there looking at that tree on the ground, and one of the big trees at the base of our kudzu field where the gorge is, that's like probably over 100 feet tall. Like it's one of the, I don't know, it's one of the biggest trees I've ever seen in person. It cracked in half. And that sound will never leave my brain. Like the sound of that big of a tree just like snapping literally in half, crashing in the woods and like dangling. It's still dangling out there over like a 40-foot deep gorge. Oh my gosh. And it like echoed through all of that. I thought there was like thunder, lightning. I didn't know what it was, but it scared me. We started running back to the house because we didn't know what it was at first. And Taylor's like, that was a tree. And then we walked back out there and saw it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was that tree.
Right. So if our experiences weren't even that bad, like our experience don't scratch the surface of what other people experienced, and that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
You can imagine what the worst case is.
I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine. Still, like, you can try.
It breaks your brain a little bit.
The way our road sits, there's an intersection a little bit down the road from us. Going one way is a dead end, and you can get back to town going any of the 3 other ways. And all of those 3 other ways were completely blocked. One of the ways, there were people blocked in on both sides, and they couldn't get out at all. So and there was just one guy trying to clear that by himself. So Taylor and I helped him get them access to be able to come out this way and go around. But it was almost a week before that route was actually cleared. And people, like, thankfully we live in an area where everybody has a tractor. Everybody has a chainsaw. Somehow we have the biggest chainsaw. Taylor was pretty proud of that. He's like, everybody has a tractor, but I have a big chainsaw. Us and the haulers spent like literally the entire day. And I don't know, we took a couple breaks and went into town to try and get service because town was accessible, but you had to like crawl through the trees, the whole main roads and everything. And people were tying trash to the down lines so you didn't run into them because that's how low they were. And we had to drive over a bunch. And they're, like you said, the trees hanging over the road. A lot of ours weren't that low, but they were really big trees at a really sketchy angle. And some of them are still like that on the main roads, and it's scary to drive under them. There's canopies at gas stations completely tangled up and flipped into the power lines, and it was just chaos. We spent all of Friday and some of Saturday clearing trees, chainsawing, pulling stuff and throwing it on the side of the road. Down the road from us, one way in particular, Ben cleared it mostly with him by himself and his boys. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pine trees, just like completely. It looks like a tornado went tornado went through there. It took the full day of many, many people on our road working to get access to town.
When I was finally able to leave my road and go down just a little bit, 2 minutes away from where I lived, and I got to more of what I would call like the main road through my town, which is, it runs parallel to the river. And there is a specific bridge along that stretch that looks like a DOT bridge. It looks like something that is very official. It doesn't look like a small little driveway. When I saw that this, I assume steel and concrete that made up that bridge, that heavy duty bridge, was just gone. It wasn't torn up. It wasn't pushed to the side. The bridge was gone. That was when I was like, oh, okay. This is really, really bad, and I don't have a grasp on what's gone on here. And that river that runs along the road, normally it's maybe 40 feet wide. The channel that's just like, it just took all the dirt. The bank is bare now with, there's cobbles and gravel and everything else in there. But what used to be farmland is now bare, and it's 150 feet across now. It's mind-blowing.
Just think about all of that traveling in the water.
Right.
And you're north of Asheville. Like, think about that traveling to everywhere in the lower elevations. I think that moment for me was, and I didn't mention this in my initial story, but the reason I woke up on Friday morning early, I think it was at like 5:30 or 6, was because I woke up to an emergency alert on my phone that sounded like an Amber Alert for the dam, like imminent dam failure at Lake Lure.
I didn't get that.
Well, it's for everybody below the dam.
Oh.
The Broad River and like the creek we have. I've never seen that creek. You can't usually see the creek. It looked like a major river. It was so wide and so high. And it just kept getting higher. That was the reason everything, besides the power being out, that was the reason everything was closed in town. They had people standing outside of Walmart. Like, Walmart had power and they were able to run and they had supplies, but they were closed because they were telling people, go home or evacuate because the dam's going to fail. And they're just waiting for it. It didn't end up failing, surprisingly.
Thank God.
But they had like a major, we kept getting on like every half hour. We were getting emergency alerts. My adrenaline that day was so spiked because of that.
But thank goodness that those service alerts exist.
Well, they were going door to door and evacuating everybody in Lake Lure.
Oh, wow.
Because it was that bad.
I didn't know that.
Have you seen pictures of Lake
Girl,
Lure?
I can't load anything. I still don't have service or power.
So getting those notifications on Friday and being like worried about that, I was like, okay, this is serious, but I couldn't load anything. Nobody in those areas that was like really, really, really bad had any service to see anything or to share anything. And so it took 3 days to really see what was happening around the entire region, not just because I think something that was different in our experience is your property, your road had the trees down and stuff, but then you go out into town a little and you can see the flood damage. Whereas like where I am, everywhere is just the trees and it's the trees down everywhere and it's scary, but we didn't get the flooding as bad. And I think, if Lake Lure Dam had broken, it would have been a different story.
All right. So we've alluded to this, but to be clear, we lost cell service for me, it was 2.5, basically 3 days. And that was 3 days of not being able to talk to anyone except for your neighbor about what happened. There's no information gathering. There's no looking up photos of Lake Lure to see what it looks like. There's no Googling, does Asheville still exist? It's as far as you can get on the road to see and talking to your neighbors. That's it.
My service was out longer than our power.
Really?
We didn't have service until the Friday after, so 8 days.
Because you have terrible service here without your...
In town, though, too.
Ooh,
still in town. In town, it's still really bad.
Okay, so yeah, I say I have service. I can text people, I can call people, but trying to access the internet in any way, shape, or form is not really an option. Except for at like midnight when no one else is. That's when I can kind of load some things.
The only reason that I was able to see anything is because we had guests here while all this was happening.
Right.
And we went into Charlotte to go to the Children's Museum and go out to eat because we needed to get the kids there. We had 2 toddlers here. And so we wanted to get them out of the house and give them something fun to do and not have them forced camping in our house for the whole week. So Charlotte had service and I was able to see everything while we were in Charlotte. That was like the only access I had to service. I didn't have service. It's still really spotty, but I didn't have service for 7 or 8 days. And then our power came back on and we were able to, I think on the day before the power came back on, we were borrowing a generator on and off and we were able to, our Wi-Fi got fixed. The internet got fixed. So I think Thursday we were able to use the Wi-Fi. So I was able to kind of connect a little bit better at that point. And that was a week after. And our power came back on Thursday night.
Okay, yeah, so my cell service went out Friday morning and I got it back Sunday evening. And my power is still out. I don't know what the deal is going to be with my internet. There's a chance that when I get power back, I'll have internet. There's a chance that it might take me a month to get internet back. I have no idea. So today is day 13 for me, if I count day 1 as Friday, of no power.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was going to get back today, but I wasn't seeing any linemen trying to repair anything on my road. So I have no idea. And my energy provider basically said, we'll try to get it back up sometime this week. That's the closest thing to an estimate they've given me.
They sent out initially, I think almost everybody in the region got 1 week after, so Friday at 11:58, and then it changed to 11:45. Pretty much everybody in our entire region got that message.
Mm-hmm.
Who has Duke, which I think is everybody.
Yeah, I got that same message.
So
initially.
Ours, we actually got it on before that, the day before that. But I know a lot of people didn't. It was just like a general message to ease people's minds, even though it wasn't accurate whatsoever.
If you had told me from the very beginning that my power would be out for 2 weeks, I would have lost my mind. I would have not been okay. Not that I am totally okay. We'll get into that later. But yeah, I understand why they did that. But yeah, I got the Friday at midnight, which was the 1 week point, and then I got the Sunday at midnight, which was just a couple days after. And then I got the, we don't know, we'll try.
I've seen some people saying, like, now that I actually have access to the world again, I've seen some people saying, like, they're having to evacuate until spring because they're not going to get the infrastructure back in. Like, Duke is just telling them, sorry, we'll try to get to it by spring next year.
Okay, I feel lucky now. I'm gonna stop complaining.
I mean,
gosh.
I feel like
Perspective,
it's very valid still, but it's valid to feel frustrated.
One reason that I'm frustrated is because I go 2 minutes down the road and on the main drag, they have power.
Yeah.
They just haven't gotten to my road. I'm so low on their priority list.
That's what happened to us too.
That's why it's frustrating for me. But again, perspective.
Well, and that's how I feel. Like, I was frustrated because I think Tuesday night or Wednesday night, our entire road up till our house had power.
Oh.
But our power comes in from the other side, and then it ends. We're the last ones on this one. And so that whole side of the road had power. The other side didn't. And the haulers and whatnot, like, I'm talking to them, like, I know that you guys don't have power yet. I don't have power yet, but everybody else has power.
You should be mad with me.
Yeah, no, they got power a day after us, so we got it before. So I'm not complaining. But
and you had the generator to run your freezers so that you could keep the food that you've harvested viable, right?
We don't have a generator. The neighbors have a generator, and they had an extra one. They have a solar one and a gas generator, and they said, if you want to use the gas generator every other day, we can just switch it. Like, just bring it back when you're done for the day, and we'll put our freezers on it. You can have it back tomorrow, and that's what we did for the entire week. So I lost all the food, not all of it, but all the food we weren't able to use within a few days of the upstairs fridge and freezer because we had 7 people here and we were opening it to cook, but we didn't touch the basement freezers, and we put those on the generator every day too. And I don't think I have to throw anything away in there. I did take like a couple loaves of bread out of those, and the door on the stand-up freezer was starting to get thawed a little bit, but I think we were able to salvage it. It wasn't anything like that I was concerned about that much. And then I noticed a couple nights ago, I went down to the chest freezer, and there's like some bags of frozen berries that I could tell thawed a little and like clumped together when they refroze. So I might check that one a little bit, but I think for the most part, we were able to save everything besides the upstairs stuff. I can't complain about that.
Yeah, that's a big win.
Especially not having our own generator.
Right. Okay, so you were able to borrow a generator every other day from your neighbors. Was there anything else, any other way that you helped your neighbors or your neighbors helped you?
Not really, other than kind of just keeping in touch and like keeping tabs on each other, making sure we were all okay. They're more prepared for everything than we are. They've been here longer. They're homesteading. And they're really the only neighbors that like I know well. It was nice to kind of have that communication of like, they're able to be in contact with some other people that we know, and just knowing that those people were okay too. You know, they're asking, are you okay? And I'm like able to tell them that, yes, you're okay. So just kind of checking in on the homesteading community.
They're probably like, who are you talking about?
And then, yeah, they had the extra generator. We haven't really met a lot of neighbors here just because, I don't know, we live down the hill and it's kind of an awkward driveway to stop in. I don't know. It's not a community where all the houses are really close together and you can see each other and everybody's pals. So we met a lot of neighbors. I think that's actually a positive thing that came out of this. We had a lot of people say, hey, we've been meaning to come say hi to you and like meet you and introduce ourselves. It's nice to meet you. We love your garden. Like the house is looking way nicer even though we have chaos out there.
I would.
They're like glad that we're cleaning it up and everything. So that was cool. That was actually something good to come out of this whole situation.
Because y'all had water. You never lost water. You didn't have hot water, but you had drinkable water coming out of your faucets.
Yes. And anybody who talked to us, like any neighbors, I was like, you know, if you guys don't have water, because we're one of the last houses on city water. Okay. Everybody else doesn't have city water.
Yeah.
But I know the water for you is a different story.
The water for me was a different story. And at this point, I do kind of live out there. Like I'm used to preparing to lose power where I am now more than I was accustomed to losing it when I lived, we'll call it, in the city. So I did stash some water. I did not stash 13 going on 14 days of water, right? Like that's a lot.
Well, because you're to be like comfortably surviving, you should have 5 gallons a person per day.
That sounds right. To do things like wash dishes and wash yourself and drink and do all the things, flush toilets.
I think 1 is like absolutely critical for drinking. 3 is like a good average, and 5 is like luxury.
Okay, well I definitely don't drink a gallon of water a day. But
I probably drink more than a gallon a day. So how much would that be for you?
Over 50. Over 50. Over any sort of capacity that I have to store anything.
Yeah. It would be 70.
So I have a well on my property. That is where I get my water from. I'm not a municipal water, but when I lose power, I lose water. So that's why I did not have water. And that was one of the first things that I had neighbors help me with. One of the people up the road has a hand pump for their well, and so they were able to pull water without electricity from their drinking water well. And then the neighbor across the way from me, they must have a spring. I don't think it's a well. I think it's a productive spring. And they basically just set a suction on it and let it free flow. Like, there's enough flow through there that they're just letting it drain into their front yard. And so that was where I collected my non-potable water. I was treating it as non-potable. I'm pretty sure they drink it, but I haven't tested their well. I don't know. So that's what I was bathing in. That's what I was washing dishes in. That's what I was doing all the things with. I will give that to the animals. They were fine. Nobody's had any issues yet. But yeah, that was one of the first ways that that my neighbors helped me because I would have run out of, especially drinking water.
Yeah. I know that you've obviously had like a longer situation of dealing with like power outage, internet outage, and you've kind of gone into the community a little bit more. The little bits that you've posted, I've seen like trying to take control of keeping ice on things and like the community center, things like that. Like talk more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was very pleasantly surprised by is how well my community organized. So where I am, honestly, the town is split into, we'll be reductive and say split into hippies and split into just more conservative people. And the two groups don't really intermix. And there was a daily meeting down in, it's not really downtown, but it's the closest thing we have to a downtown. And it took me a few days to realize that it was there because everything was word of mouth. So once I realized it was there, I went down there, and every day more and more people were gathering as it was getting around. But there was a free hot meal. There was basically a community grocery where people were bringing extra produce they had. They were bringing, things that were thawing in their freezer that obviously weren't going to stay good. And they were like, I can't eat all of this. Let's just put everything in one pot and everybody can share it. So I thought that was really cool, and how quickly they organized that and how quickly it grew was really interesting. And so, yeah, I showed up and was like, great, how do I help? But it's also one of those situations where you almost have too many hands that want to help, and it slows things down. So even though ice is tiny, right, it's not like I was really feeding people. I was helping 1%, and then the other more than 99 people were doing the rest, right? But that was the one thing. They were like, we need somebody to own this. And I was like, I can own it. I can put ice on the food that's in the coolers and keep things cold, keep things good so that we can have it available for a meal to feed the community that day or the next day.
So is that still happening now that it's been almost 2 weeks? Is it still like a community? And
I don't know. So eventually they got a solar set up and they got a freezer and a fridge. So that's when I was booted from my job. And at that point, which was a week or so in, that was when supplies started arriving. And I was like, okay, people are okay. People are getting water. People are getting food. I feel like I can take a step back. I can start taking care of myself. Because initially for the first few days, that was a concern for me. It was, I hope people have food. I hope people have water. So that organization was really critical, really, really critical, before aid started arriving in those communities.
I have such a different perspective on this because being on the edge of everything happening, our airport, our little county airport here is where all the supplies are coming into. And so our community gathering situation is, there was a lot of Facebook posts of people asking, hey, does somebody have power where I can have ice to keep my insulin or my breast milk cold? So there was a lot of community like that happening in the community where people were helping each other in like bits and pieces. I know that we have a shelter set up at our high school right now, and there was a lot of that, but it was less of everybody coming together in person for like community meals and stuff because all the supplies were coming here, and what we needed was volunteers to unload planes. Our tiny little airport is getting, I think, 60-something the first day, 80-something the next day, over 130 planes. So private planes flying in from all over the country of donations that they needed people to unload and organize and get ready to distribute to the more mountain western areas, just a county, like the west side of our county and west of there. So like our community action situation was volunteering to help everybody else. We were needing things like ice and the gas lines. Like we had gas stations open a mile long. We had to drive over a half hour to get gas. And it wasn't, again, in air quotes, that bad here. It's a different perspective because like I'm not seeing that. Probably it was happening, I assume, somewhere, but I had my 5 friends here. There were the 7 of us here, and we have all the food we need. And I was just trying to focus on like spending time with them
it was an interesting thing to witness how well and how quickly that got organized, and also how many more people there were who wanted to help, you know, do work crews and take trees off of houses. And I live in a community where we have a lot of tools. We have a lot of skilled people, and there were carpenters who were actively fixing people's roofs and things. So my community, the community that I'm fortunate enough to live in, pretty well took care of itself, except for, you know, food shipments and food supplies that you can't just scrap together food that you haven't stored, right? Like we needed that help. But that was really cool. And then they quickly started helping other communities. It was, okay, my town's taken care of, this town's taken care of. Let's go help Asheville. Let's go help Burnsville. Let's go help Spruce Pine. Let's go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think we kind of got that initial, like, everybody's got a chainsaw, everybody helped clear the roads. But the linemen got here really quickly because we are on the edge of everything. And so I think they all just migrated here. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Every single parking lot was filled with trucks.
Can you send them to my room?
I wish I could. We shifted into get volunteers to send things to everybody else who has it a lot worse really quickly. From that initial, like, oh my gosh, there's trees everywhere. Mm-hmm. It shifted very quickly. A lot of people didn't have power. A lot of people needed to find food and were panicked about the grocery stores. Our fast food restaurants were open Friday night. The fast food restaurants were mile-long lines as well. So everybody was able to get food. Anybody who could get out of the house anyway. I think there was some concern for people who weren't able to leave their houses, but a lot of the community efforts definitely shifted to help everybody in the mountains.
Right, yeah. My experience is very different. So Friday's when the storm hit, and then Saturday, I was worried about the people who couldn't get in contact with me, right? Like, I was safe, but I was thinking in my head, like, oh my gosh, my poor dad thinks that, like, something happened to me because I'm not answering. And I don't...
Poor Mickayla.
And I don't have the ability to answer. I have zero cell service. So that second day, on Saturday, I tried to leave. I tried to get anywhere I could go. And got turned around on every single route. Keep in mind that I can't Google anything to see what roads are open, see what roads are closed. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I know the storm came up from the south. So, like, I'm not really going to try to push it south very much. I'm going to go into Asheville and I'm going to see if I can find service in the city. No. Okay. I'm going to go north and see if I can go anywhere there. 26 North was closed. Turns out a dam broke. I didn't know that at the time. Washed that out entirely, and now it's closed until, like, March 2025. I tried to go northeast. Don't think I knew 40 East was closed, but I knew that Swannanoa was bad, so maybe that's why I didn't go over there. Anyway, for one reason or another, I didn't go straight east, but I tried to go northeast. That was also closed. And then I tried to go to Leicester, because I heard Leicester had resources. They had power, they had service in theory, and I was not able to find anything. So, when I realized, like, okay, I don't really know a way out, and I've just burned half a tank of gas, and I can't get more, and stores are cash only or closed, and everyone is trying to get food, I was like, I'm gonna switch gears into just hunkering down. Like, I know I have a little bit of water, I know I have neighbors who can help me, I want to keep my remaining fuel for in case I do need to just book it south and go stay with family. Yeah, that's when I was like, all right, I'm gonna not move. And also there was a component of don't be on the roads unless you have to be on the roads, because people are trying to help. People need resources. Like, we don't need to be getting in car accidents right now and making more work for first responders and everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, at that point, too, though, I don't think anybody knew how bad it was because there was no contact with the outside world. So, like, even if you were out and you got in a car accident, our county literally shut down 911. They said 911 is not, they're done. They're too busy. Don't call. If you need help, don't. Like, they literally put out a Facebook post saying that. They said, in that Facebook post, it said 911 isn't operating at the moment, so don't need help. And consider all roads in Western North Carolina closed.
Okay, that's pretty clear.
Yeah. I can't even explain. Like, I don't have a word for the chaos. I'm just going to use the word chaos because that's the best word I can think of.
Right. At least for me, I never thought that I would encounter something like that, right? Like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, we live in a society, we're organized, like, we have plans for this stuff. Nope. Even if there's a plan, like, how do you plan for that perfectly, right? Like, something else is going to go wrong. Something else is going to be unaccounted for. There's so many variables in that. It's kind of impossible to plan for. But I never thought that I would experience this firsthand, if I'm being really honest.
I guess it's different than what I would have thought. Like, the massacre that happened with the floods and everything, just like everything being destroyed. I didn't expect it to happen like that. But moving down from Michigan, I've always been like a little bit nervous about hurricanes because it's not something I've ever encountered. And then just like experiencing the last handful every year, it's been like, oh, well, we just get some rain. It's fine.
Right, and that's what it usually is. I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, which is closer to where they typically make landfall. And it's never been a consideration. And honestly, Western North Carolina is generally considered very geologically and meteorologically safe.
Yeah.
Right? We don't really have earthquakes. We don't really have crazy things happen. Now we do.
It's a climate haven.
It was.
That's what it's called.
And something else that I want to mention on the aid and donations and volunteer front is I'm going to say I was surprised 100 times, but I was surprised that I didn't personally see more resources coming from government agencies. I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm not saying they're not helping, but I think we got a little bit of Red Cross water bottles from Red Cross. Everything else that I saw coming into that community where I live is from individual citizens, is from private people, is from grassroots organizations who saved our butts. 100%. No other way to look at that. If individual people hadn't said, you guys need help here, I would be telling a very different story right now. Yes, I have food, but when you're in a community where people don't, they start to do, I'll say, desperate things. And so even though I have enough, that doesn't mean that I would stay safe.
You don't have enough for everybody else.
Right. So, seriously, for anybody who did anything, thank you for sending that in. Those were the first resources we saw, and they made a huge deal. They really, really did.
I think most of the donations that I've seen and posts I've seen asking for volunteers, all the airport volunteer situations, everything, that's all been private donations. I have seen that FEMA and National Guard are in the western parts of our county. I don't know about anywhere else. So, like, that's really all I can say about it because most of what I've seen is private stuff.
I have seen federal government helicopters. I know that they have had to helicopter so many people out. More people needed that help than I'm sure they could organize to give them. But I have seen that pretty constant overhead where I am.
Yeah, I feel like you saying that just keeps reminding me of more and more details of this. And so if we're missing anything, if there's anything that you want clarification on in the future, like, let us know because there's no way that we can cover this. This is already going to be a long episode. Yeah. And that's fine. Like, that's perfectly fine. But we're not going to be able to get every detail. Probably we're going to miss some things.
Right.
So we're just covering this the best we can at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday.
When I haven't had a shower in 2 days.
Yeah. Also, If it wasn't clear, we're at my house, Mickayla's house, because Sage still doesn't have power and internet, etc. And she drove here tonight to have dinner at our house and record this so that we could do this in a timely manner for you guys. Because who knows?
And Mickayla fed me, and it was the best meal I've had in a very long time.
In our county, the two worst places, the two places that got hit the worst, I guess, and they just so happen to be two of the places that have been in the news the most, because one of them's completely gone, Chimney Rock, and Lake Lure is the dam that almost broke, and that is just, I think, just downriver, downstream from Chimney Rock, and that's what I was saying earlier, where Chimney Rock, the water that came through there just like wiped out half the buildings completely, and they're all floating in Lake Lure now.
Right. That's one of the towns that just doesn't exist anymore. Really.
It was like our favorite place to go. That's where we always brought our family whenever they came to visit. So as far as like our county goes, which if you know where that is, like it's on the west side of our county, and that was obviously the worst hit part in our county, but I know there are a lot more places that were really, really bad too. I know Black Mountain is another place that we go often. I've seen them a lot in the news. They got really, really, really flooded.
And landslides. The landslides, they were bad.
Our trash service is out of Black Mountain, so we are still
not anymore
without trash service, which again, I'm not complaining, completely understand. It's not that hard for us to take care of it on our own. That's one of the reasons I know Black Mountain is not doing well still, or at least the last I heard. And then Highway 9 is one of the main avenues that the water came down when the dams broke up near Mount Mitchell on those two water reservoirs. And that is where that leads directly to Batcave, which is just another it's literally just like a little road area. They have like a little apple winery, something like that. And like a roadside stand that we always went to and brought family there. I know that's like, I think the winery cider house thing is still there, obviously with some damage, but everything else there is just gone.
I heard that Batcave is one of the towns that you cannot drive into.
The road's gone.
You have to hike in if you can do anything, and I think they even took the footbridge down today so that they could actually start working on repairs.
Yeah.
So to give you perspective, like you legitimately have to hike into some of these communities. That's the only way to access them right now.
Mm-hmm.
Still, 2 weeks after the storm.
There's a YouTube video of somebody hiking in and filming the whole thing. And they went in on both sides of where the road was off. So if you want to go to one side of it, you have to hike in one way. And if you want to go to the other side, you have to hike in the other way, depending on which direction you're coming from. And it's literally just river. Typically, before the hurricane, you can park at the side of the river, walk down, and sit on these massive boulders in the river and like put your feet in the water, and there's like a little bit of rapids and stuff. And now it's just all river. It's all big boulders, and you can't even tell that there's a road there. I know Swannanoa is next to Black Mountain. That's somewhere that you said you were avoiding because you knew that was going to be bad.
Yes, that's one of the first places that I heard of specifically that got it really bad. So that's on the east side of Asheville. And as far as I know, still, again, I haven't really been able to be that much on the internet, but my impression is that's one of the places that was hardest hit. That was where I heard some really gruesome stories of them recovering people who are no longer alive.
Black Mountain and Swannanoa, the videos that were coming out of there were really, really bad. Those were some of the scariest videos that I watched, and that's what I was saying earlier with the rapids, the rushing. That was really hard to see.
I know that there are small mountain towns like Spruce Pine, places like that, but off the top of my head, there's so many, it's honestly hard to keep track of. But again, it's not just Asheville, it's not just the Asheville area, it's not just the River Oaks District, it's everywhere around Asheville. It's Appalachia close to us.
Yeah, literally an hour out from Asheville, east and west, and I think more than an hour out on both like north and south of Asheville. Just picture that large chunk of space. All of western North Carolina, a lot of upstate South Carolina. I know Georgia.
And Tennessee.
And East Tennessee. Everybody is struggling right now. It's bad.
So major roadways, I-26 north of Asheville, between Asheville and Tennessee, that's closed for the next 6 months or so at least. I-40 west is closed for the next 9 months at least while they finish that.
I think it's in September 2025 was estimated.
Okay.
So a year.
Sweet. And then the Blue Ridge Parkway, at least through the entirety of North Carolina, I think even more. Closed indefinitely. No reopening date for that one. That one's just done until they can fix it. And then another big aspect of this is it's not just road infrastructure, it's public utilities. So yes, power lines are one thing, but also public water is another. And the city of Asheville, and then also they feed some of the towns, around them in the outskirts. They are working on getting the public water system back up. The landslides and the flooding and the erosion were so bad that it ripped out the water infrastructure that was buried underground. And I know after some significant damage about 20 years ago from a storm event, they rebuilt it so that they thought it would be good for forever, basically. And this storm ripped it out, took it out. So they are making it even stronger. So I think that plays into how long it's going to take. Because if they're going to rebuild the whole thing, they're going to rebuild it so that it hopefully doesn't get destroyed like this again, which means trenching it at least 20 feet deep is what I heard, and then armoring it. So it's when you're looking at that amount of area and that kind of project, there's no way to do it quickly.
I mean, also think about the cost of that while they're trying to recoup everything else at the same time.
Yes, and this is a major time in Western North Carolina for tourism.
Yeah.
This is leaf peeping season, right? Like normally we would be saying, please come, please, bring all that tourism money. And now, especially in the Asheville area, I know there are some smaller counties who still want some degree of tourism who are okay, but we're saying, don't come. We don't have the ability to take care of us right now. We can't take care of you.
Which is so scary at the same time, because that's how people feed themselves through the winter with money, That's how people make their money.
And farmers right now, a lot of their outlets are gone. I know Vanna was talking about that. We all know that I idolize Vanna. So I was keeping up with her stories when I could check Instagram, and she's been posting some really enlightening things that I'm unaware of. I'm not a farmer. But October is a crucial month for them to have padding to literally make it through the winter financially and be able to set up for next year. So to lose those avenues of revenue at this time is brutal for them too. Yeah. Not to mention the damage they sustained from all this.
I know. I guess if anybody's wondering, I think Vanna's farm is okay. She's in my county. I don't think she sustained major damage. Maybe one of her greenhouses.
I think she was trying to raise revenue to fix some sort of infrastructure, but all things being said, right?
Yeah.
Nothing catastrophic other than
I think her
the huge change. Yeah.
And then
she's staring down now.
The revenue situation. And then thankfully she has online sales that she does for value added products.
Right, she's got oil, she's got salt, she's making a bunch of wreaths right now from flowers that she grew. So if you're looking for a way to support a local Western North Carolina farmer, there you go. There's one. Go buy her stuff.
And I know lots of people are putting out fundraisers and things like that and trying to figure out how they're going to diversify a little bit. We kind of went over our morning, our day of hurricane happening.
The day of Helene.
Yeah. Did you get any major damage or minor damage on your property?
I thought that I was going to walk up to the pasture in the woods and just see chaos, and I didn't, and I was kind of like, are you sure? There were maybe a few trees that were down in the forest, but that's the forest, right? The only infrastructure that I have back in there is my fence. So there were a few like loose limbs, dead limbs that had fallen off trees. Totally normal. I didn't have to really do much. The closest thing to damage that I sustained is in my shed. There's like a panel on the, I forget the word, but it's like the sunlight for your roof. Whatever that is. A branch hit that and cracked it, so I'll have to fix that. But all things
like
said,
skylight?
yes, thank you. A skylight. There we go. But animals are okay. House is okay. I'm physically okay. Fences are okay. All the things, largely speaking, very okay. And I mean, to say that I feel lucky is an understatement.
I was really surprised also when I walked outside and I was like, where are the trees? Why are they still standing? Our birds didn't even come out of the coop. Like, their door was open, and they didn't come out until it was done. I was really surprised. The ducks were out. They were having the best day of their lives. Friday and Saturday were their best days ever, because there was so much water. But my chickens didn't come out of their coop at all. They just hung tight in there. They were like, no, we're good. We'll stay in here for a little bit longer. It's a little windy out there.
Good stakes.
And they were mad that I didn't feed them until like 11:30. We have a lot of trees down in our woods. They're not down, which is kind of frustrating because those are really dangerous. Now I'm kind of scared to walk around in the woods because they're all hanging on other trees. So we need another storm. I'm not asking for another hurricane. We need another storm to knock those down. But honestly, our trees that usually drop a lot of branches, like during normal storms, didn't drop any branches. Like, that seems to be the trend. On light storms, we get a lot of branches and whatnot on the ground, and when it's crazy, I'm always expecting like way more, and there's not. So I don't know what's up with that, but we had a lot of, not just leaves, but like chunks of leaves, where it's like a whole piece of a branch came off, but it was like this big. It's only like a foot wide. And that was pretty much our whole yard. So we didn't have any damage to our house or the animals. Our fences are just kind of around the coops, and they don't really have a lot of trees around them. So I've had like really, really high anxiety, and I've had a lot of like survivor's guilt, I guess you would call it, over the last couple weeks. But like physically, everything is fine here.
Right. I think the biggest damage or loss was food in my fridge. And the food in my freezer almost went bad. Like Homestead chickens that I have had grown and harvested there almost went bad. But I was, by miracle, it feels like, able to buy a generator. Did not have generator funds, bought it anyway. So that's going to be, figure that out later. But yeah, went across Asheville, got that generator, and I've had that hooked up to my chest freezer ever since. And I just threw everything that was in my kitchen freezer in the chest freezer. So,
I mean, we lost food too, but nothing that I'm too like hurt about, because it was stuff that probably should have been used up before my friends came anyway. And then we just had people opening the fridge, and I didn't have power before they got here, so I couldn't like clean out the fridge and get it organized. So a lot of it was leftovers that needed to get tossed regardless.
Yeah, a lot of mine was, random stuff, condiments, jellies, jams.
Not as bad as losing a whole chest freezer full of homegrown chickens.
Yeah. I don't want to think about it. So in terms of keeping, daily life moving without power and without cell service, what did you have like a daily routine, and how different was it from your normal one? I know you had guests here, so that impacts it too.
Yeah. I keep saying that it didn't feel like that whole week. And still, I feel like I'm trying to get back into real life. But that whole week in particular did not feel like real life. It felt like an alternate reality. I think it was just like everything piled on. And I don't know, for me in particular, if that's because we had guests here or if it's because of everything that was happening on the side of that. Because it really was just like camping. Like, We had our camping lanterns, we had candles, we had puzzles. We just hung out here. We made a whole bunch of breakfast food on the grill. So, like, it didn't really feel different than camping, I guess. It felt different than normal life. The times where I'm like, okay, it feels different are when I go to look at my phone and I can't get anything to load and I'm not getting any messages or anything. And when I leave and I have service somewhere and I can see pictures and videos of the like mass destruction around me, and I'm like, oh, that's like 20 minutes from me. And yeah, so I can't really answer that because the whole time my power was out, I had people here visiting. And so I was like hosting a camp out.
Right.
But for the most part, other than power, I still had water. So we could take cold showers. And I had my friends here who gladly helped me do dishes. I cooked most of our food. I know that you didn't have water. I know you still don't have power. So yeah, tell me about your daily, what's your daily routine?
Yeah, so I'll split it into the first week and the second week. So the first week, I wasn't working because the closest access to power and Wi-Fi and those things is like an hour and a half away, pretty much. So that was just like out of the question, and I was trying to make sure people in my community were fed and that everybody was okay. So it did not work that first week. I'm trying to even go back and remember what my daily schedule is. When you have no power, daylight becomes incredibly valuable. And so I was waking up with the sun, and then, you know, yes, I have plenty of windows in my house, but there's like 3 hours during the day where there's enough light in the house to be able to see to do things. So I was still having to do things like laundry and dishes. And at first, I didn't have friends who had power. So I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna do laundry in some buckets in my front yard and just, hang my underwear to dry between the two other lines so that my neighbors don't just see my underwear hanging in the front yard. Taking my dishes outside, gathering that spring water, heating it up on my stove, because I can still use my gas stove as long as I have a lighter on the outside. It does use electricity to do the ignition, but if you have an external ignition source, you can still use it. So still using my stove, heating up water. My water bath canner holds 5 gallons of water. I use that thing for everything. So I heated up my dishwashing water in that. I heated up my laundry water in that. I heated up my bath water in that. When I did need to take a bath, I would heat that up. I would carry that into my bathtub. I would set it down in the bathtub, and then I would just like dunk my head in. Obviously, this is not boiling hot water. It's just warm water. Dunk my head in, get my hair wet first, and then just like take a washcloth or a bowl or a cup or something and just like pour it over me. and then, use soap really quick so you don't get cold, and then just like pick it up and then pour the whole thing over me. And that 30 seconds of like actually feeling like you're taking a shower when you're rinsing off. Phenomenal. I now bum showers off people who do have power. I'm definitely taking a shower after this before I go home. But yeah, that was my first week, is just staying busy with keeping up with all of the normal life things, because yeah, it's only doing dishes and laundry and taking a bath, but it takes 8 times longer to prepare and do all of those things because everything is by hand. Everything is slow. There's no heat, turning the water on and having hot water. I gotta heat up 5 gallons of water on the stove, which takes 45 minutes.
So did you, this is a question on like, how serious did you think this would be? Did you try and do laundry or dishes ahead of time before the storm, thinking the power might go out?
I thought maybe, it'd be out for half a day. When I saw the storm, I was like, whoa, it'd be crazy if it was out for a whole day, which now, looking back, I'm like, dumb. Okay. No, I didn't prepare more because none of us had any idea.
Like I said, I get a little bit nervous with hurricanes still, just like being from up north. So I was a little bit nervous about it, and I was watching a live stream that it was literally the only news anywhere that I was watching that I saw posted anywhere who said, this is going to be really bad for North Carolina. It was the only person I saw say that. And so I was like, shit. Okay, well, I better, like, try and do my dishes. So I actually did try and do my dishes ahead of time, and I did try and do laundry. And you know what that got me? It got me a washer full of wet clothes that I forgot about for 2 days and smelled really gross. And I had to go hang out in the line, and now I have to rewash them all now that I have power again. I took a shower soon enough after the power went out that we still had hot water in the water heater. And it was just enough that my shower was like ever so slightly lukewarm. And so I washed my hair in the tub first to minimize the amount of time the cold water had to be on my body. And then I showered, and it wasn't that bad. But everybody else the rest of the week had just like really cold showers.
Cold showers.
I got lucky.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I'm going to take another one this day. And that's the day the power came back on. I was like, all right.
Timed it just right.
Yeah, I know, I was getting a little gross, but you know, I don't like being cold.
Yeah. Yeah. But as far as this week, the second week, my daily routine, I would say, is a little different. I am working not a full 8-hour day, trying to work most of a day. And I clearly cannot do that from a house with no internet, no power, because I work remotely on a computer. So that those things don't combine very well. So I am going north to a coffee shop that has Wi-Fi somehow. And I buy breakfast and lunch there so that they don't kick me out. And then, but they close at like 2. So I'm not done with my workday by then. And so I have to go south to a community center to find their Wi-Fi, because in the Asheville area, it's not back to normal. You can't just go anywhere and link up to Wi-Fi. Yeah, I could go to Walmart and Lowe's, but they track like everything you do and don't give you access to certain websites, and that doesn't work for what I do. That's not an internet connection that I want to connect to and give them all of my company's information. So those are really the only 2 Wi-Fi sources that I know of that I can do. And again, I have no idea if when I get power, fingers crossed, this week, I have no idea if my internet's going to come back with that or not. And so I'm looking at, okay, what are long-term solutions? I might be completely changing my internet provider so that I can get access, because if I can't get access to Wi-Fi for another month, I'm going to have to buy a totally different setup, and I don't need 2 internet providers. So I don't know what my daily routine looks like next week, if I'm being real honest.
So are you having to take like PTO hours for like partial days right now? Or like, is that what you did last week?
Yes, last week was all paid time off, and then this week I'm filling in the rest of my timesheet to 40 hours with PTO. I haven't really taken vacation this year very much, like here and there for a couple random things, but I haven't taken significant vacation, and my work is very understanding of the situation. One of the people who like founded the company is from this area, and so they get it. I'm not back to work because they pressured me to. I'm back to work because 1, I want to take my mind off something. 2, if I sit still for very long, I start to go a little bit crazy. And 3, it's just nice to have a distraction.
I was going to ask you if you, I couldn't ask you because we literally couldn't talk to each other. I was thinking about the whole time, I'm like, I wonder if Sage is like doing garden things right now. Is she working on her garden? Is your checklist completely checked off?
Absolutely not. When I was sitting there at the beginning of the week when all of this was starting to unfold, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a while. I was like, I have so much time now. Normally I don't have this much time. But then, you fill that with, okay, making sure the community's okay, and okay, I'm going to go over to my neighbors and see what they know. I'm going to go over to these other neighbors, tell them what neighbor A told me, and then also get more information from them. Like, it's just, it's very different. So no, I haven't touched the garden.
It's because you're waiting.
Yeah, another aspect of it for me is I don't want to plant anything without having the ability to water it. Yes, I technically have running water in my house now because I have a shared well. My neighbors have the power hookup to the well, so it's the well pump is hooked up to their generator. But the water pressure is like a quarter of what it normally is. And so to get it up to the garden, it's like a dribble. It's not anything that I can set a sprinkler on and like go walk away and come back to. So I don't want to plant my onions and then have them shrivel up in the 75 super sunny degree days that we have now. Like, there's no rain on the forecast. None. Which in a certain way is great, and in another way is terrible.
I had left my seedlings in the basement for like 5 days before I remembered that they were down there and the power was out.
With no lights?
Yeah. They're not the happiest, but they're not dead.
That counts for something.
I'll give them that. They're outside now. They've been outside for a handful of days at this point, so they're okay. I don't know if I'll ever get them into the garden. We'll see.
A huge aspect of this whole experience that we really haven't talked about much yet is the mental health aspect. Yes, we are physically okay. We had food, we had water, our houses are intact, but through all of this experience, it takes a mental toll on you, even if you are physically okay. And something that I've noticed when I've been interacting with people is, you greet someone and you ask them how they are, and the immediate response is just laughter right now, right? Because how do you even begin to answer that question? Not that it's funny, it's people laugh because it's so absurd, it's so unfunny that's almost all you can do, right?
It's like a coping mechanism.
Right, exactly. And so the common responses that I hear are, "Oh yeah, that's a loaded question." Or I've started to tell people I'm passing on that question until I get my power back. I'll let you know.
It's been weird because I don't think I processed any of this, and I still don't think I've fully processed all of it. I am just typically somebody who copes with humor in general, but I don't think that I had the chance to process this at all. Like, literally 0% until my friends left 8 days later. I immediately got a severe migraine, the worst migraine I've ever gotten in my entire life. And I get really bad migraines. And I spent the rest of the next 2 days on the couch, just like laying here, being just like sad. And we tried to film a video, and I was just having a really hard time getting through it without crying, feeling bad for everybody else because I'm fine. Like, physically, we're fine. Everything's fine here. Everything in our town, other than trees lying on the side of the road, our town's mostly back to normal. I've just had a lot of guilt, like feeling guilty that nothing bad happened to us, even though I'm like grateful that it didn't, Like, I'm not upset that it didn't. I'm not upset that, like, I don't have a better story to tell because I'm very grateful that everything here is boring compared to everywhere else around here. I felt in an in-between place because I really, really wanted to enjoy my friends being down here because I haven't seen them in over a year. And we've been planning that trip for months, and I wanted to be present and enjoy them. And I haven't seen my friends' children since they were 1 and 1 month old, and they're now 4 and 2.5. And I just wanted to like enjoy my time with them. But at the same time, I was like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I should be volunteering right now. I want to be helping people. Like, I feel guilty that I'm having a good time, So that's been a weird dichotomy in my own brain. And then as soon as they left, I was just like, okay, I can let everything hit me now and just like take it all in. And I still don't think I have. I think we have to make a trip up to the mountains this weekend to go get straw. And I know I'm going to see some destruction on the way there. And I don't know if I'm mentally prepared for that.
The whole trees that got ripped out of the ground and carried down the river and are now laying in what used to be someone's hay pasture. That site is probably what we'll see a lot of, and is something that got me when I saw it.
I know that like going further up into the mountains and seeing more of the destruction is going to get me. That's going to be really hard for me. And I'm actually like, I've had a hard time thinking about that today because like those plans got made today.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Even though our properties, even though our bodies, quote unquote, made it through the storm, we're still part of a larger community. How do you phrase that? Watching your neighbor lose their house, lose everything that they own because it literally washed away.
Or a tree fell on it.
Right. No, that didn't happen to me, but you can't be around that kind of loss being an empathetic person and not also, be affected by that in your own way. And that's not minimizing what they're going through. That's grief as a community for what has happened to the community. And there is survivor's guilt that goes along with that. That's, why did it happen to them? Why didn't it happen to me? Trying to make sense of that, trying to assign order to that where maybe there is none. Trying to figure out why, almost, right, like why you deserve to be spared in that way.
I keep saying, like, we're not from here, like, we're making this our home, but, like, our kids will be from here. And that's where I'm gonna start crying if I talk about that.
Yeah. I think the points that really got to me were during the first few days, especially because the sun goes down at like 7:30, and that was when I had realized it was bad. Had no cell service or had just gotten it back, and didn't know the timeline, knew people were suffering, didn't know how to keep my own head above water, didn't know how bad it was going to get, didn't know, how scarce food and resources and water were going to stay, just like didn't know how this was going to turn out. And again, not out of it yet, still in it in terms of my experience. And I just had nothing to do from like 7:38 until midnight when my body will let me go to sleep. Then just make a fire, sit by it, and think about all those things. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know if I can just sit here and ruminate.
Being alone with your own thoughts, and there's no other noise that's happening.
Yeah. And also just the fact that, like, normally I love living alone, but living alone while you're going through all this and not having just, like, someone there with you. Yeah, it's isolating.
I know, like, even Chrissy on Sunday, like, early afternoon on Sunday, I don't know how, but it came through and I got a message from Chrissy on Instagram asking if I had heard from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, even Chrissy hasn't heard from Sage. I was like freaking out. And so she's like,
y'all, I tried.
She's like, if you hear from her, will you let me know? And I said, yeah, I'll, like, do the same. And like I checked on her and I wanted to make sure she was okay. Thankfully, she wasn't here.
Right, she was elsewhere. She was traveling.
Obviously, Taylor was here, and then my one friend showed up, and then 4 more showed up. So, like, that's what I was saying. It felt like a, I don't know, big distraction, where I felt like I wanted to pay attention to them, but I was also, like, in the back of my mind, really focused on the situation. And something that I'm a little bit nervous about, and this is not just for me, I'm nervous about this for, like, the greater region and everybody's mental well-being, is this is going to be a prolonged thing. I'm nervous for everybody's mental state going forward, knowing that resources are going to stop coming in. People are going to forget about it. The news cycle is going to move on. And there's still going to be so much devastation here. Our entire region is going to be dealing with this for years.
Businesses are going to close. People already have or will lose their jobs because those businesses kind of have to close. Again, in a lot of ways, a lot of people don't have the resources to just rebuild.
Yeah. And
because a lot of the damage is flooding, insurance policies are a little different around flooding. It's not as straightforward as some other things. So yeah, in terms of actually getting to the point of rebuilding and what that means for the local economy and what that means for all of these people who have lost a significant amount, if not everything. That doesn't change in a month. That doesn't change in 2 months. That's sometimes years.
And I mean, the geography of Western North Carolina has changed forever.
Yeah.
The economy has changed forever. The businesses that exist here is probably going to be changed forever. because even if people rebuild, they're not going to rebuild exactly the same way. Like, it's going to be different in some way, even 5 years from now, once hopefully a lot of it's built back in some way.
All right, so we've asked this question before on the podcast, pre-hurricane. We've established that neither one of us really identify as, being what a lot of people would label as preppers. Has that changed for you? Do you see things differently now?
I think there are a few things that I don't want to use the word stock up on, but there were things that I had in place to be ready for power outages because they happen a lot here, and I just didn't have the continued supplies where we ran out of them. So oil lamps, for example, I like using those so much better than using candles, and they're easier to move around, especially with having the toddlers here and the kitties and everything. I need I couldn't find lamp oil anywhere. Even in Charlotte, they didn't have it while we were there. I checked. And the wicks. So that's something that I'm okay, the power goes out here often enough, and I use those often enough because of that, but also because they're cozy, and sometimes I just like to have them on, that I need to have that in supply, at least enough for a week of the power being out again, which I only had to refill them once. So that's not something, when I say stock up, I don't mean hoard, I do think that we need to get a generator. And that's something that has been in the discussion since prior to the hurricane. It's just something that hasn't been in the budget, and we haven't made room for in the budget because we have so much else to pay for with getting the house in order. And I don't know. It would have been smart, but at the same time, it worked out okay. Now that we have 2 freezers, literally 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks prior to the hurricane hitting, we were we need to get a generator now that we have 2 freezers. That's going to be something on our list for this winter. So I don't necessarily think that's calling myself a prepper, but I think it's just it makes sense. If I have more than 1 freezer with all of this food, it's a lot of money invested, and it makes sense for me to, one, because I've probably saved a lot of money not having to go buy this food on a regular basis, growing it myself and everything. It makes sense to preserve that with a generator. I've been thinking about this all week because I knew this topic was going to come up while we talked about this, whenever we talked about it next, because we didn't know when. And I feel like there might have been other things, but I can't remember what they are now.
But I mean, you've kind of always had a really healthy stash of canned food, so it's not really a concern. Do you feel like you're going to stash water in any way?
That's a tough one too, because we don't, our water wasn't, our water was functional this entire time. And I know that's not always...
This time, sure.
Yeah, I know that's not always going to be the case. But it's always been in the plans to get our well running. And I've always wanted to do a hand pump access to that once we do. That's always been in the plans. That's another really expensive project. So it's not something that, even if we wanted to move it up, we feasibly could in the next probably few years. That's going to be down the line. But we do have IBC totes that we're planning to get water storage up. I didn't have to worry about watering our birds this entire time because we have their watering system set up. Even if we didn't have water, I have not had to worry about watering my chickens since spring. We've kind of got that all in place. I'm not worried about water. I have considered storing some water in the basement, but with how much of a mess it is right now, I think that's also going to be a thing where I'll just take the chance until we have a dry basement and can get things organized and figure it out.
I know somebody's going to comment that mason jars full of water take up just as much space as mason jars.
My mason jars are all full of food. I keep having to buy more jars.
Okay, all right. So you don't have any just empty mason jars floating around, all right?
I have a lot right now, but they're going to be filled in the next couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
I think that's a waste of lids, personally. And also, somebody's probably going to say, "Oh, well, you should worry about it. Don't put it off." I know. I'm going to regret saying this at some point now that I'm saying it. But you know what? I don't have the money to drill a well, so it is what it is.
Knock on wood real quick.
If I have to boil my city water, I have to boil my city water.
Okay.
It is what it is. How about you? How you feel about this? Because you've been dealing with the water situation.
Water and power, and I feel like I might be a little bit of a prepper now. Yeah, I mean, I think living through that and seeing the lack of federal response. I understand there's red tape, and I understand there's a lot of nuances that went on behind the scenes. I get why things played out the way that they have. But yeah, I think I'm going to be more intentional about how much food I put away. I think I'm going to be intentionally seeking out, grocery store food, finding it when it's on sale. Normally, I've just been prioritizing putting away what's in my garden, and if I pass by a roadside stand that has really delicious looking peaches, yeah, I'm going to stop and get peaches. But I haven't been serious about putting away like a food stash. I haven't been serious about putting away a water stash. Prior to this, didn't have a generator. Now I do. But it runs on gas. And we just found out that in a situation where you lose power, gas is really scarce. Sure, I could stock up on gas, but that's not exactly safe to just have a stash of gasoline somewhere. Something like a solar generator or something with multiple fuel sources is more versatile. So, yeah, I think I will be changing the way that I do a few things. Not anything truly substantial, but it is something that I will be much more mindful of moving forward, especially pet food. Like, I had food.
Yeah.
I could figure out water. I did not have spare pet food. Now I could feed them my very expensive chickens, right? Like, I'm not going to let them go hungry, but chicken food, having more than I need on hand. Dog food, cat food, having more than I need on hand.
Okay. How much do you just keep like a month on hand?
Normally, so yeah, what I've been doing to this point is I'll get a few bags when I go, and then when I'm just about to run out, I'll go restock.
Okay. That's what I do too.
I don't think I'll be doing that from now on.
I think that I had the same issue. We ended up having to go to Tractor Supply, and thankfully they had some feed. The place we get feed was completely like blocked in, like the roads. It's a sketchy drive on a normal day.
Okay.
It's like way out there, and there were a lot of trees down. I think that I'm gonna try and keep more chicken feed. That was another thing that I was thinking of. I remember the other things. I need to get some more lighters. So I always keep like 50 pounds of flour and sugar on hand. Is that something that you think you'll do?
I mean, okay, don't get me wrong. I bake and I cook a lot. Like, I have multiple bags of flour. I don't order from Azure Standard because I don't know. And Azure Standard typically has things, super bulk, and that's where a lot of people who keep that kind of stuff, they get it from. Because the Azure Standard drops, the logistics of that and working a job, I don't know how to navigate that. And so I do keep multiple bags of flour, right? Like, I normally have 2 bags of 00 flour. I normally have 2 bags of all-purpose flour and 2 bags of bread flour. So, like, that's a lot of flour. But also, I was making sourdough loaves in my Dutch oven over the fire, and you can go through some bread flour, even just making a few loaves of that. So, like, if I were in a situation where I needed to make bread repeatedly, like, that stash isn't gonna last me. So I do, and I did kind of, like, I've gotten used to working in more bulk, just being a homesteader, not intending to, intentionally keep more ingredients around in case I was in a situation where I needed it. Just as a consequence of jarring, a year's worth of pickles at a time. You've got to have a lot of apple cider vinegar and a lot of other stuff on hand in order to do that. So I got lucky in that aspect in a lot of ways. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't have gone hungry, but on day 2.5, 3, I didn't know that I was going to be fine.
Yeah. Just eat pickles every day.
Pickles and peaches.
That was another thing. We have camp stoves and our grill and extra propane. And so we use those, and it's always been in the plans, but a gas dual fuel grill or a stove eventually, something like that. We just have electric right now, and I couldn't use it the entire week that we had friends here. That was frustrating. So yeah, that's definitely like never leaving the plans. That's always going to stay in there. I don't know. Just having alternative sources of cooking things is helpful. Like, we have a tripod for the campfire. We have our Blackstone. We have a Coleman camp stove. I would like an oven situation, though. That would have been very helpful.
Yeah, the oven, my only solution to that was just throw my enameled cast iron pots onto coals in the fire.
Yeah.
It was the closest thing I could do.
I have just cast iron Dutch ovens. Like, they're not enameled that I use for the fire. But it was so warm also still, so like we were trying not to make a fire until...
I didn't care. I was like, I don't know what it is, but I don't have power, and it makes me feel like I need to keep a fire going all the time. So I pretty much kept the fire going all the time.
That would be my ideal, honestly. But with having people here, it just didn't happen. So the grill was easier, and there were children to feed. So like, this is faster.
Yeah, totally.
So do you think you'll do less frozen food and more canned food in the future?
I don't think I'll do less frozen food. I think especially now that I have a generator, that feels like my backup. Is it an infallible backup? No. But I'm not ever going to create a perfect system no matter how much money I drop on different equipment, right? So, I have a generator now. I'm going to keep a small stash of gasoline around, and that'll be my CYA.
I mean, we've said so many times during this episode, like, there's no way anybody could have prepared for everything that happened here. Like, I probably could have prepared better for what happened to us, and like in the future, I can prepare to that extent. But nobody can prepare for a tree falling on their house. Nobody can prepare for a 30-foot rise in the river and it taking your house away. Literally, nobody could prepare for that. Mm-hmm. The only way to prepare for that is to evacuate with enough notice, and we didn't have that.
Right.
So you can only do what you can do.
Right. As far as water goes, I'm going to look into hand pumps and things like that. I don't know how involved that is. I really don't. I can't Google it yet because I don't have enough service. But when I get reconnected to the world, yeah, I'll also look at that. But again, the generator is like a temporary fix with that. Yes, it uses gas and that's inconvenient, but it's doable in a pinch.
Has this changed how you see like the homesteading lifestyle or like your motivations to do homesteading at all?
It's definitely driven home the concept of community sufficiency over self-sufficiency. Like for everyone, not even necessarily in my community, but on my road, for everyone to have their own individual stuff for what they need, that would be so over the top, right? Like if we can all share, even if it's only tossing a generator back and forth between a neighbor every other day, right? Like that kept your stuff frozen for the most part. We don't all need a hand pump. We need one person with a clean well with a hand pump and the willingness to share. Like I was talking about earlier, that basically like free grocery store that we all threw together based on the supplies that we had on hand before aid started coming in. That kept people fed. And it's only by the willingness of everybody to not hoard their own stuff and say, no, this is only mine, that was ever able to come together. And so I don't, even though I want to be more prepared, I don't want that to drive me to, I don't want that to solidify me in self-sufficiency. So that's been a huge takeaway for me. I kind of already feel like I max out my garden with what I can produce and keep up with as one person.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm already there. I don't think I have a whole lot more capacity in the garden, in the land itself, or in my energy as a person to push that much farther. It did make me wish that the sheep were in milk so that I could have, more stuff to share. The garden, I've gotten a lot of food out of it, but it's not peak season right now. It's about to go dormant. And so I didn't have this just like abundance of things to share with people. But I was able to share some eggs, and if the sheep had still been milk, I could have shared that stuff. So like the animal products would have been helpful.
The first day that we were cleaning up everything. This has been like playing in the back of my mind the last 2 weeks. We were cleaning up trees literally like the day of the hurricane and helping people and meeting neighbors and stuff. And I was like, I said out loud like so many times, like, this does not feel like real life.
Mm-hmm.
And Taylor, at like one of those points, he said, but like, this does feel like real life. This feels like more real than normal life. And I goosebumps again. It keeps happening. And just like the thought of like helping people and knowing your neighbors and getting to know them for the first time and like in a crisis situation, and everybody is just like so friendly and like willing to help and saying, hey, like, I have an extra generator. Multiple people said that to us. Like, if you want to borrow a generator, like we have one, just come by. Like, thank you for helping clean up the street so we can get out of our house. I have my reasons for homesteading, but this just made me want to save more seeds to share, to start more plants to share, and not like for money. Like, I just want to like give things to people because I enjoy them and I want them to enjoy them too. So I think that's kind of like the main takeaway for me. Like, I want to be involved in community more. I want to be able to like help people more and like get to know my neighbors more. It's always been my motivation, community, and like getting to be a part of this community because we're new here. Like, we don't know anybody really. So getting to grow that is really cool.
I feel like we could continue talking about this for 5 hours and still not cover everything, but I think we got the basics. If you guys have any other questions that you want us to answer about this experience, feel free to leave those down in the comments and we'll answer those. And also, if you are looking for ways to help, we will leave what people are looking for right now and organizations to contribute to in order to support people who really do need help right now.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air. To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next.
If you like video podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too. We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.